Our special focus today is on gender-based violence, and today we're joined by well-known African historian Dr. Mathole Motshekga, who will talk to us about cultural norms and explain if there are issues which may be stumbling blocks in the fight against gender-based violence. Dr. Motshekga, thank you for being with us here on the program.
Thank you, Leanne, and good morning to the listeners.
The first thing that comes to mind is that we are a patriarchal society. However, that is in all cultures across the board. You know, what was it traditionally like before?
Leanne, actually, we are not a patriarchal society. This patriarchy is a legacy of the past. Because if you take South Africa, you have the Mathole is the mountains of the Queen of Heaven. You have Maluti Mountains. These are the mountains of the Queen of Heaven. And Luti and Lundi is the son of the Queen of Heaven. So in Africa, African people believe that the supreme being is a woman and the child is a son, and that the son is the one who created, mandated by the mother. But we then worship the son who is the creator and relegate the mother to the background. Now, therefore, we are essentially a matriarchal society, and that we have been socialized as a patriarchal society, which means that we have to revisit the socialization of our children. And also, if you look at the struggles that brought about the freedom that we have, you have Queen Nzinga of Angola, Nehanda of Zimbabwe, Queen Mujaji, the Rainmaker, Manta Tisi of South Africa. These were women who led the wars and who were also spiritual leaders. But if you go even further back, you find that Queen Isis and Horus, so even in our spiritual tradition on the continent, there is no patriarchy. This patriarchy, I think, is the byproduct of colonization. And leaders like Mama Albertina Sisulu and May 1987 with Oliver Tambo and Father Trevor Huddleston, they held a conference in Harare which put this matter in correct perspective. So I think really we need to re-educate society, re-educate our youth, that women never took a second place in our society. So it's unfortunate that we have a pandemic such as gender-based violence.
And it really is. I mean, you know, you're talking to us about our history, and this is the reality, is that we're looking at the history. But perhaps you can explain to us what some of the cultural barriers are and how they may be impacting on the end to gender-based violence.
You see, people hide behind culture. I don't know which culture is that, because right now, for instance, if you take the Balobedu of Queen Mujaji, they have been under the rulership of women for 400 years. There has never been an uprising. Nobody has questioned the authority of the Queen. Even myself, I've been a legal advisor to the Queen with my qualification, and I never even asked her what standard was passed. Her word was final. And I think that these excuses must stop. But unfortunately, unless we do something national system about the socialization of the youth, we will never overcome this. Maybe also, from the political parties, we must stop teaching political education to members of the organization. We must have a civic education which socialize the whole of society about the role of women, the centrality of women in our life, because women and children come first, not men. So this patriarchal system is a social construct that we should combat. We need to have a program to combat gender-based violence in which men play a central role, because we are the central problem in this pandemic.
I mean, this is the reality. It's you know, as women we can speak about this until you know, until the end of time. But the reality is, if men do not speak about it, and if men do not call out other men that they know very well are doing this behind closed doors or even in front of them, it will continue unabated. And we need the support of men in this time, because it cannot just be done by women, because it's a crime against women that's being committed.
Actually, it's a crime against humanity. If there's any other crime against humanity, is gender-based violence. I think all of us as men have to stand up. There has got to be a dedicated program to combat. Must not leave this to government. It's not a question that we must say government do something about it. We must stand up in our houses, socialize our children in our streets, and make sure that we ourselves address this pandemic, because it's unacceptable. There's no future, there's no country without women and children.
Now, you know, we look at traditional norms. What are historical traditional norms that may be abused right now? Because, you know, in your first answer, you outlined it beautifully, how, you know, this is not a cultural way. This is not the way things were taught. However, it is happening. And if we look back historically, what are those norms that are being abused, especially for men?
You know, historically, you know, we, for instance, as African people, we don't only believe in God, we believe in God and ancestors. And to communicate with the ancestors, you have to go to your aunt. You cannot, as a man, you can't go to the ancestors and go directly. You go through your aunt. If you want to marry, you either go through your aunt or your uncle, who has to personify an aunt, which means even in the traditional sense, the mother, the aunt becomes the senior person. As I'm sitting here, my father's sister, and in the spiritual sense, is senior to my father. If I have to communicate with the ancestral world, my father's sister is senior to my father. So I don't know, when people say it is cultural norms, which norms those are. But I think that that's why I say we need to revisit what we teach our children, because maybe we have been misleading our children ourselves. And also other religions, which foreground men rather than women may be a problem. But I don't even think that could be the reason, because say in Christianity, we talk about the Black Madonna and child. And in the Catholic Church, we talk about the Rosary, we talk about the Black Madonna. So I don't find in religion, in customs, any basis for the abuse of women anyway. Whether it's custom of religion, this is simply a crime against humanity.
It certainly is. But let's look at some, I suppose maybe cultural things that have been passed down. Now, you know, I know that, and I'm not going to only say it's happening in rural areas, because it happens all over. And a lot of the time, young girls have always been taught, you get married, you move into your husband's home, and even if he is doing something to you, you stick it out. It is your marriage, you stay there, you sort it out. It's your husband's home. Things have changed, but there is still this way of thinking by a lot of areas in society that, this must be sorted out in the home, and don't let anybody else know your business, and you stay. You never leave, you stay. This perhaps is the wrong teaching in this day and age.
It is true because we don't adhere to the original teachings of our ancestors, and some men wants to abuse women and hiding behind something that is actually not there, because when you marry a young girl, she comes, they will give her the rules of conduct, they will give you the rules of conduct. And in these rules, there's nothing that allows you to abuse her, because they will say, by virtue of this marriage, this wife belongs to the family, and you treat her like you treat your sister. So there's just, I grew up in the rural area, and I have been participating in marriages, and I know for certain how these traditional laws works, and I also studied traditional law. There is just nothing like that. So these people who do this, they have an agenda which is a satanic agenda, and they should not hide behind customs. And I think we need a dedicated program to combat this pandemic wherever it occurs.
Dr. Motshekga, we've got an entire department that has been created when it comes to women and children, and yet we have not seen anything changing. In fact, we're seeing things get worse. And I think the great fear at this point in time is, as bad as the situation was before coronavirus, many are really fearing that it is only going to get worse. And the reason we assume this is because of the socioeconomic condition and situation that a lot of people find themselves in, is that you will have women that have nowhere to go, and you have men that are jobless, and they are now, maybe turning to whatever it may be, if we talk alcohol, if we talk drugs, to try and alleviate the pain of not having a job. And then, of course, aggression starts and abuse starts, and that vicious cycle continues. So, this situation we find ourselves in, the socioeconomic one, what are your views on this?
I think you have a point there, Liana, because sometimes you have affirmative action, and where women are brilliant, and you find some women are well employed and they earn more than their husbands, and some husbands feel inferior, and in some cases some men are unemployed, they have to depend on the women, and they feel inferior. And it's unfortunate, because you shouldn't feel inferior. If you are unemployed, you are unemployed, unless if the wife abuses you. But some men feel so inadequate that they resort to violence. And it shouldn't be like that, because the socioeconomic conditions are not created by women. They are created by the modern situation that we live in.
I think you've so eloquently put that. I really do. We're going to have to leave it there for this morning, but thank you for talking to us here on the program, Dr. Motshekga, just giving us a bit of history. He's an African historian, Dr. Mathole Motshekga, talking to us about cultural norms which might create stumbling blocks in the fight against gender-based violence. We're going to continue during the rest of this hour to focus in on gender-based violence. We've got some inserts coming your way, as well as another interview. And this is an important conversation that we're going to be having this morning. Stay tuned.